If we were to just talk about
Last week on the Digital India Summit and Awards 2016, some of India's finest experts gave their insights for making India a critical manufacturing hub.
In that sense, there's a big urban,
This week, we look at the different factors that can contribute towards developing a digitally inclined workforce.
In the local languages, it has to be conceptualized.
While we are talking about digital India ecosystem, it is imperative that we need to develop skilled workforce that is critical to achieving the Digital India mission. With the Prime Minister unveiling the Skill India initiative and training programs running galore, Digital India mission is bound to provide jobs to the youth in rural as well as urban areas. We have with us another dynamic minister who's just joined us, Colonel Rajyavardhan Singh Rathore, Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting, to share his views on how India is preparing to develop a capable digital workforce.
Digital India, of course, is the Prime Minister's dream, and I think it's the future of any workforce, any city, any country. The world over, people are talking about digitalizing and networking all together so that the transparency, efficiency, and accountability comes in every sphere. What actually makes this a success? I guess at the end of it, it is expansion of digital services. It is bringing the digital literacy down to the grassroots level. And when you do that, you will have all the people empowered to start using the digital platform for improving their lives. Now, programs like this, I think, is extremely critical for bringing the government and the private sector together. In taking the literacy, the e-literacy, the manufacturing of electronic goods, the programs of the computers and internet to the masses needs active participation of the private sector with the government. And I think that will only become successful if we have close cooperation with the private sector, with the private sector being able to communicate to the government on a regular basis as to the direction and the need of amendments or modifications to government policies to strengthen the program of Digital India and making it a success. Thank you so much.
With that, we will come to our last panel, and we'll continue the theme in our last panel discussion of the day, powered by timesjobs.com. It is called Developing Digital Workforce. And on the panel, I would like to invite Rahul Patwardhan, CEO, NIIT. Shrikant Sinha, CEO, NASSCOM Foundation. Raj Raghavan, HR Head, Amazon, India. Rajashekar Reddy, Director and Chief Operating Officer, InnovSource Private Limited, and Vice President, Indian Staffing Federation. And Vivek Madhukar, Chief Operating Officer, Times Business Solution. And our moderator for this last panel discussion is Nitin Sethi, Partner, Chief Commercial Officer, Aon Hewitt Consulting.
Maybe I think one of the first stuff I thought I could actually throw open, and Rahul, maybe more to you in terms of, what do you think? Is India quite ready to kind of face up to what's coming our way in terms of digital economy? From a manpower, from a people availability, talent perspective?
Well, the short answer would be no. I think the sheer size of the transformation that is required and the speed at which it's going to happen is something we have never seen before, the world has never seen before. And for India in particular, the opportunity is immense, and therefore we need to set a pace perhaps even higher than what anybody else is thinking of. And therefore I would say this is a huge challenge, So I think for a company that's in that space, obviously we are extremely engaged in trying to understand how we can tackle the scale of the problem and the range of issues, because we're talking about equipping people in the startup world, and there's a very short supply of highly talented full-stack technical people to support startup industries and IP creation industries on the one end. So there's different kind of training required there. So there's a whole spectrum that we have to talk about, and interesting to see how all this pans out.
No, sure. Thanks, Rahul. That's interesting. So, Raj, maybe from your perspective and you know, what you're seeing, you know, literally Amazon's at the center of, you know, a lot of this whole startup ecosystem, you know, the ecosystem that's building around for suppliers. How do you see this in terms of, you know, what's available out there? How relevant is it for, you know, companies like yours today? What more do you think, you know, companies like yours need to do and the larger ecosystem needs to do to build this up?
We are a marketplace, as you know, and we have all kinds of sellers on our platform. And some are big, some are small, some are really small, some are mid-size. And you know, if you were to go ground up and if you were to look at the bottom of the pyramid and the suppliers and the sellers that you have on the platform, there is a huge opportunity to get people digitally workable. You know, for example, how do you go and put your stuff on the Amazon platform? You know, we have a huge workforce that helps sellers do that. You know, there are hundreds of them that just help sellers do that. In fact, to the extent that, you know, we walk into mom and pop stores and help take photographs and then digitally, you know, upload them onto our platform. There's a big opportunity for, I think, all of us to get digitally more savvy. And, you know, for Amazon, beyond just the sellers, I think it's about, you know, how do we get better at mobile skills, you know, mobile as in, you know, user experience, you know, the technology of it itself. How do we get better at social networking, and how to use big data better? So there's a big opportunity there.
And ready for you, you know, in terms of where you are as an organization. What are you finding, you know, easily available? What's difficult out there? What are some of your challenges in terms of, you know, getting digitally trained, digitally available, you know, trained workforce out there?
There are two aspects to this digital workforce. One is that part of the workforce who's going to take India towards the digital economy. That's, you have the programmers or app developers, etc. The second part, which is equally important, I would say more important, are the people who are going to use those services. Like Raj was talking about, people who are on the ground, people who are going to use GPS, people who are like your Uber drivers and all, who are going to use those kind of things, or who are going to use e-governance services. For some reason, we are not paying attention to them. Right, so we could probably import your the digital upgradation and get a lot of things into India, but ultimately they need to get implemented and serviced at the ground level and used by these guys. So a look at that is something I would like to draw attention to.
Sure. And Vik, in your context, you know, we were again kind of speaking about this, that how it could literally help us bridge the gap that exists in society in that sense. You know, there's a big urban-rural divide. You know, there's this whole challenge about getting more women at workforce, and you had some interesting observations around some of those.
Yeah, I think what we are talking about really was, you know, most of it is around the shortage that we have. But how do we address this shortage? And really, if you look at the overall situation, we have just 10 to 12% of the women working in the workforce. Even in the IT space, it ranges between 10 to 20% the moment you look at different levels. It's not that these women are not available, but obviously what they require is something different. The same goes when you look at, you know, almost 70% of your white-collar professionals are there, employed professionals are there in the top 8 metros. The rest of the country really does not have employment to that level as of now. Now, can we use technology to distribute the work? So can people work out of home, out of their own towns, and do the work at the central level, because that's an unexploited potential. It's not just that you're doing it for inclusiveness, but it just lowers your cost and unlocks a completely different potential of manpower that we've not really touched up till now. And I think that's something which companies would need to you know, focus on, because it's not just that flexi time or out of home is happening only to address this area. But if you look at the newer generation, what is called as the millennials, flexi time is like one of the top 2 reasons on their job choices.
One stuff is about training. The other stuff is, how relevant is the training from an employability perspective. But where are the real jobs in that sense? Are they out there, and what's the access to them? So in the work that you do, so what's your point of view on that?
The challenge today is, and that's where probably, if I look at what NASSCOM Foundation is doing, we have a partnership with the government of Haryana. We have a partnership, and today if I look at Haryana as a state itself, out of the 275,000 people supposed to be employed in IT industry next year, 12% people are employed in Haryana itself, out of which 0.5% would be the local youth. So government today is looking at how programs can be run for these people. So not only is it creating jobs, it is creating the right kind of jobs, it is bringing the right kind of differences. I think more such initiatives funded by CSR, if they are run, things would be different, things would change.
Sure. Oh, interesting, very interesting story. So maybe back to your thing, with more and more of, folks getting trained on digital technology, what's your point of view of, how would some of this stuff start coming together to solve some of the larger problems that we have, in the society in terms of healthcare, in terms of, rural-urban divide? Any comments?
What talent we have, and if you get people from the tier 2 towns or tier 3 towns and they're coming onto the main locations, then they will be, they would want to solve the problems of those locations. So a lot of what has been solved in India has been solved by a lot of people coming back from US and, replicating models or replicating some of the areas there. So, on a broad level, I think if we are able to include or get people from these parts of the country onto the mainstream, then I think they would be doing a lot of things in that area.
Ready again to, so the kind of workforce, let's say, companies like yours have in terms of, and stakeholders that you work with, what are you seeing your customers, your end consumer change in terms of, and what's your sense of, the right kind of availability in the market?
My view is that digital workforce is not about creating the IT workforce. So creating IT workforce, skilling IT workforce is one part. But I would look at this whole thing as creating digital workforce is how can the entire workforce, who are not just the 10 or 5% of our employable workforce, but the entire workforce, how can they be upgraded on the digital space, right? So I gave some references to some uses that these people require them to do. Unless they are able to use those things and we are able to create some level of infrastructure for them, we won't be able to reach the digital economy stage.
What's the role that the government can play and what's the role that private sector can play? So any comments, any suggestions that you have on that?
Of course, it goes back to the IT sector providing or like creating those kind of apps or those kind of modules, etc. That is one part definitely. Second is adapting those things at the ground level. Like we've seen some courier companies using GPS. We've seen somebody taking signatures onto this thing. We've seen documentation of banking being completed at your doorstep with photographs and WhatsApp, etc. That's all part of digital literacy. And that section is what, if we upgrade, we will reach there quicker.
And then my question is that are we leaving it for too late? Because if the idea is to leverage platforms and technology in literally every sector or space that we are in, whether it's logistics, whether it's healthcare, whether it's something else, are we leaving it for far too late, for people to finish some kind of, 12, 13, 14 years of education and then come and kind of pick up some of these skills? Or does something else need to change in terms of how education gets imparted in this country for people to be relevant in this in years to come? So, Reddy, what do you want to kind of...
Yeah, definitely. The way India views education is very, very different. We just know that you finish your 12th and then you have to do a graduation and then you have, of course, now there are a little more options coming up, but then you have engineering, medicine and something else, and then MBA is supposed to be the top of it all. But on the vocational side has been missing for the last, 50 odd years. And for some reason, we've kept vocation even below the 10th standard level from a cultural acceptance point of view. So why not build that vocation, the vertical itself? till the high level, which is equivalent to PhD at the top level or an MBA at the management side. So we have kept vocational training below 10th. I'm talking of in terms of the cultural importance that we give in our everyday life. Usko, he is just a worker or he is just a fitter or something like that. So that's a lot needs to change there. Of course, it's going to take quite some time.
And Raj, again, are you seeing any of that change happening with, you have a large supplier ecosystem. What are some of those challenges that they face?
Yeah, I think there is a huge education that is required today. In fact, even before you get into selling on an e-commerce platform, you need to start believing there is a payment system, a payment infrastructure that actually works digitally, right? And even today, less than 1% of the country, possesses a credit card, right? And those that even have a debit card hardly use it for anything other than withdrawing cash from the ATM. So there is a lot of positive reinforcement that is required in order for people to realize that technology actually works, and technology works in a way that's not going to topple you down. At the end of the day, if I'm a small seller in a small village or Pune, to the way you're talking about, anything that I sell on a platform needs to have a return that comes back to me. And so to that extent, it is a big deal.
So, maybe a last string of questions and maybe comments from each of you. And maybe the starting point is the question I asked Rahul, as we were starting off, that is India ready to kind of respond to some of this change that's coming our way, and to what level, will we sit here 3 years from now and say the same thing? Would the answer be no? So in your mind, what are those one or two things that, the corporate world, a few things that the government needs to do to kind of enable the ecosystem to be more geared to, leveraging the digital ecosystem better?
The government is doing its bit. I think there is still a lot that can happen at the education setup, which also requires corporate intervention. So what we've always been talking is about getting the people from this, colleges and training them in the corporates or whatever we spend or the effort that we do. But there's very little activity that we do at the educator level. And that's an intervention which could actually impact far more people. So let's say even if the course does not improve over 4 years, people could, if the educator is smart and is responsive to he could actually influence the course, the teaching in the course or the applications in the course to be far more closer to what the corporate really wants. So I think, while there are loads of things to be done, I think it's the academy corporate interface, which has been, something that we've talked about for a long time. But that's an area where we could do a lot more besides what the government is doing in this area.
Raj, is there any, or Rahul, any comments that you have to that particular point, the whole interface between academia and the corporate world?
What we see there is that over the last 2-3 years, sector skills councils have been defined for most of the major industry sectors. Roles have been defined, competencies related to each role have been defined with differing levels of maturity across different sectors, depending on what speed they started up. So some good work has happened. But I believe that in a world which is changing so rapidly, if you're not going to be paranoid about driving things much faster and start getting complacent, then this whole demographic dividend opportunity that India has will be lost. And instead of having a demographic dividend advantage, we will have an albatross of 400, 500 million people who are not trained adequately, and we would have lost the opportunity. And there's a window of opportunity during this period when we have the demographic dividend advantage of 20 years. After that, it will not be there anymore. So speed is of the essence.
And Reddy, before I come to you and maybe to the same point that Vivek mentioned earlier, there is sometimes, and maybe you could share your perspectives on that there is a bit of a resistance to kind of learning and adapting some of those things till you see the real difference, the real change that it makes to you. Have you seen any examples of, of good incentivization to be able to help people to go through that process, make that change, and then see the results?
I don't know. I'm not sure if incentivization is going to work there. I think what works best is brute force in this particular case. Like even inside organizations where we have people who are highly educated, we find resistance when say an ERP is implemented or when some networking group is created, we find resistance. So I'm of the opinion that we have to do a brute force mechanism where, like, for example, like KYC has become a compulsion in the banking industry, and now everybody has to comply with it. So set a deadline date and then just switch over. That's the only way.
And what's your take in terms of a few things that definitely need to happen to make people more ready for this kind of an economy?
I think we have good amount of IT workforce, 4 million, but for whatever the cost arbitrage reasons, they prefer to do business outside the country. So some kind of incentives for them to do work inside India, which will help India move to the goals of the digital economy much faster. That's something which can come in from the government side. Otherwise, people are ready, I would say.
And Srikanth, anything that you want to?
Yeah, probably first thing which I would say is, of course, digital literacy. And my thing is, I don't think it's only the job of CSCs and NASSCOM Foundation with its 100-odd centers today to provide digital literacy. It's a job of everyone. Second is connectivity. Connectivity has to reach out to people so that they can access all the things that is being provided by the government. Second is content. Content has to be in the local languages. It has to be contextualized to the place where it is. So content has to be very, very relevant, and content should be the king. And third is, of course, technology. So how can you leverage on technology probably is also going to be key if we are looking at a workforce, and tomorrow if we are sitting on a panel like this and say that, no, we are ready today.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you.